Hi, we're going to go ahead and do chapter 9 of Hero. We're going to do this in two sections. So some of the questions you'll answer today in your Canvas page, and some of the questions you will answer tomorrow in your Canvas page. I'll go through which ones at the end, and I'll make sure I only type those questions into that section of the Canvas page. Sit back and enjoy chapter 9 of Hero. I tried to cook all of dinner that night, and as a result, we ended up ordering a pizza. The smoke from my failed attempt at cooking was so bad we had to shut the doors between the kitchen and the rest of the house and open all of the kitchen windows. The temperature was supposed to go down to freezing that night, so it got pretty cold in there. We had a good time at dinner, though. We talked about Nicker's brother, who had just won his second race and seemed to be right on course for the state steeplechase in May. We talked about skiing, something I never had the chance to do. We talked about school, something all three of us had problems with. Mr. H admitted that he had left school for good as a junior in high school. James had dropped out as a sophomore, but had gone back to get his GED and was currently enrolled at a local junior college. James and I talked about movies we had seen recently, and Mr. H said he hadn't been to a movie since 1970. I begged and pleaded with him to go to a movie with me the next day, but he just laughed and brushed it off. Why won't you go? He looked off into the distance. I used to go when I was younger, but after a while, things like that just don't matter. It's the things that you do in your life that matter, not the things you see. Yeah, but there are some things that you can never really get to experience in life, but you can see them and learn about them in movies, I argued. What have you learned in a movie that has actually helped you? Mr. H counted. I thought hard, and the longer I thought, the harder it got. The longer I thought, the harder they laughed, and I knew I couldn't say I had learned how to hotwire a car or how to tell the difference between an M16 and a sawed-off shotgun. That would not have impressed Mr. H. In fact, he would have used it as another reason not to go to the movies. A bridle. What? Mr. Hassel gasped out between laughs. I learned about bridles watching Black Beauty and about bucking and what happens is if to a horse if you give him too much water without cooling it off first. Their laughter had slowed down while I was talking, but now James started all over again. Oh, boss, I think he's got you there. It ain't the same, he said calmly. You may think you've learned about bridles, but I bet if I were to give you the gentlest mare and a bridle, you could not get it on her. And I virtually guarantee that if I was to put you on a hoss that bucked, you'd learn how to fly a lot faster than you would learn how to ride. Yeah, but Sean, I'm old. The things I enjoy are a simple sunrise with the smell of freshly cut hay in the air. He smiled at me. I don't need to learn how to blow up a car. I laughed, even though it spooked me how accurately he had read my thoughts. There was a pause in our conversation, and I could tell we were getting ready to start dishes, and then I'd be sent off to do homework. Hey, Mr. H. Hey, Sean. I looked at James, and he winked. It was okay then. He would stick to his bargain. Where'd the bullet in the case come from? Mr. H. shot a look at James. Don't look at me, James said, holding his hands up. He asked me about it this afternoon, and I told him to ask you. I could tell Mr. H. didn't quite believe that James hadn't put me up to it. He just sat there chewing on his pipe. I wondered for a second how many pipe stems he went through in a month. Well, that bullet actually means more to me than anything else in the case. He looked at me, but I'm not entirely sure you will understand why. Give me a chance, I said. He sighed. It was November of 43, real close to Thanksgiving. Somehow the holidays always make things seem worse. I was miserable. So I wandered off to camp. Just wanted to be alone. To have some thinking time. Unfortunately, I wasn't watching where I was walking, and I stumbled into a German soldier lying in a trench between some trees. What was the German soldier doing? Hang on, I'll get there. Sorry, I mumbled. Mr. H took a couple more minutes to get his thoughts back in order. I did not know if I was on his ground or if he was on mine, and I guess it really didn't matter. We both pulled our guns on each other at the same time. Now, I had been in the service since '39. and I had seen plenty of action, but I had never been close enough to see the eyes of the men that I was going to shoot before. I couldn't pull that trigger. I can only assume that the same was true for him. We both lowered our guns at exactly the same time. Wow, that was lucky, I said. Shh, James hissed, kicking me under the table. And I realized that although James had heard these stories before, it wasn't something that Mr. H talked about very often. James was as into the story as I was. As we lowered our guns, Mr. H continued, unaware of my interruption or James's response. He winced, and I realized that he was injured. I had been stationed in England and had been to France and Germany several times during the last 4 years, but the only language I knew how to speak was English. I dropped to my knees so he would know I was not trying to hurt him, and I crawled over to him. He must have been running and tripped. He had somehow landed on his own knife, and it had gone clean through his upper calf. I think he had also hit his head, and I don't know how long he had been there, but he felt feverish. I helped him apply the tourniquet. He split his chocolate bar and clean drinking water with me. That may not seem like a big deal to you right now, but chocolate was very rare to have during war. I hadn't had any chocolate in months. I helped him get closer to his camp, as close as I dared, and then went and found him a large branch to use as a cane. When I took it to him, he took the last bullet out of his gun and he gave it to me. He smiled. It was Christmas and Thanksgiving all rolled into one. It was the best meal and best gift I have ever had. We sat quiet for a few minutes. I had questions I wanted to ask, but I was afraid to. I didn't want him taking them the wrong way. I was dying to know, though, how he could help a man who belonged to the enemy's side, and more importantly, how he had felt fighting the rest of the war. But I got the feeling that I needed to think about the story some on my own before I asked questions. I could tell by the way James looked at Mr. Hassler had given me the whole story this time. And now, he said, getting up, James and I will hit the dishes, and you will hit the books. I want a rough draft from you by the time you go to bed tonight. Ah, come on, I can do it later. Besides, you're both doing fine with just a little more education than I've got now. The world's changing, Sean. I don't know if it's for the better or the worse, but I do know that you will need a college degree to do much of anything. James nodded vigorously. And it's easier to do it if you've paid attention and done well in high school. I'm not going to get into any college anyway. Not with that attitude. And maybe college isn't what you want to do, but you're going to come back saying that college wasn't a choice for you because you failed ninth grade English. I opened my mouth to complain, but he cut me off by shaking his head slowly. Boy, you would have made a great dad, I moaned. He laughed. I can't believe you think it's funny to make a guy do homework on a Friday night, I said. Mr. H stopped laughing and turned around. Bad habits are hard to break, and good ones are hard to get into. The sooner we get you into the habit of doing your homework, the better off you'll be. Now go on, get up there. I actually did try and work on my rough draft that night. I tried at least 40 different beginnings before I admitted to myself that I just couldn't sit down to write. I did a few journal entries because they were easy and fast. I had a lot to say about what had happened to me in the last few days. Then I did a couple of sketches of Knicker for my art class. I knew I could get extra credit for them. And that night made up for the late papers and kept my grade at a B for the quarter. Mr. H scared the crud out of me when he set the plate of cookies and a glass of milk on my desk. I just looked at him for a minute and then I burst out laughing. I really couldn't help it. What's so funny? He asked with a puzzled look on his face. Milk and cookies? Oh man, where were you when I was in first grade? Doesn't matter where I was, Sean. What matters is where I am. I quit laughing. Thank you. Thank you for everything. The cookies are just what I needed to get through the next hour of homework. He picked up my sketches. What's this? I grinned. It's calculus. He rolled his eyes at me, and I could tell he really wasn't in the mood for my humor. I'm in art too. I don't have any textbooks here, so I can do my other makeup work yet, but I can always get extra credit for my sketches. They help me keep my grade up. He held my second sketch under the lamp and looked at it critically before he handed it back. Nice job with his face, but his felt lock should be just a tad shorter, he said, pointing. Makes him look out of proportion. You mean his legs? The lower part, about where our ankles are. Just as I was going to ask him another question, the phone rang. Back to work, he said to me as he moved towards the door. Remember, I want to see that rough draft tonight. I sighed and put my drawings to the side. I got out some more notebook paper and then looked at my notes. I had started going through my lists, numbering them so I could go back and group similar ideas together when I felt someone's eyes on my back. I did not turn around. Did you forget to leave me my blankie too? No answer. Then I did turn around. Mr. H had a funny expression on his face. What? Mr. H didn't say anything. What happened? Who was on the phone? Get your jacket, Sean, and meet me out front, he said heavily, starting down the hall. Nicker, did something happen to Nicker? I yelled after him. No, Nicker's fine, he called back. Just come on. I shoved my feet into my shoes without untying them and hurried down the hall, mystified. Of course, I thought, he wouldn't have gotten a phone call about Nicker. So who had called? What would have made the expression on his face look so cold and hard? All right, that's the first half of chapter 9. Do the second part tomorrow. Answer the question today. Is Mr. H a hero? Explain why you think that. Yeah, we'll just do that first one today.